Hi folks, Jonathan Wilson, Toga Man GuitarViols. I want to talk a little bit to those of you waiting on my instruments, which in some cases has just been epic, my infamous epic cue that I've been kicking on a hamster wheel for the last 20 years. A little background on that. So basically, when I started off, it was like I was just building my own dream instrument, and interest stacked up. And this is like 20 years ago, and I started taking a couple commissions here and there, and then suddenly I was just, within a couple of years, I had to quit my day job and off and running. And it got peaked out to where in the last decade, we're talking about like maybe 30 some cycled through a year. Now, there were some variations because I was juggling a few different model types, different logistical issues had come up. Heck, even life itself comes up. And so running everything to a tight grid with all these ducks that just want to wander out of those little rows, well, it's something else. And especially being a lone ranger, being an individual luthier with just enough to be super busy all the time, but not enough to have payroll for, a big support staff and all the other things that go with that. So guess what? I have to wear too many hats, basically. So now, one of the dreams I've had, at least in somewhere halfway through the last 20 years, was that I could have something that was tooled up, that was really, predictable and reproducible with some level of predictability and precision. I've tried a lot of things, everything from CNC to all these things, and delegating this, delegating that, and generally it wound up being a zillion times more work, and I would have to rework it, so it would just wind up being no good and back on my desk again. So anyway, I started working on this thing back in 2016 as a concept of a composites based instrument, primarily carbon fiber, but we've been evolving over to things like flax and hemp, and basically what I like to call organic composites. Anyway, all the engineering, all the mold making, all the stuff, that stuff happened like odd nights and weekends over several years. It was crowdfunded initially by a group of roughly 10 people, and it grew to 15 or something like that, and then I'm still cycling out the last of that old lot, but most everybody who is in there has been pretty much within the last couple of years of since we moved to Valencia. That's another story. So the years of the last decade, good chunk of it were spent in Fillmore, California, in a climate-controlled shop that we're sharing in with a lot of other builders, so we had all our own spaces. And it was a underground little woodworker paradise until the city bureaucracies and things got a little too hot. And I wound up moving here right before the pandemic. So it's been a pretty crazy time. So I've been adjusting to not only dramatically different labor conditions, overhead conditions, supply chains, expenses, and by myself mostly. And so adjusting to that and estimating to that means that a lot of my old data doesn't fly anymore. I'm building something that's a completely different set of processes that I've been developing. So I'm pivoted, I burned the old ships, burned the old models, and we're not sailing back to that same ship. And I think it's a good thing. It's been sort of way of getting this, out there and done. And by the way, I'm really thrilled with these things. However, what that means to people waiting on this epic list that gets kicked around and jostled around a lot has been, well, the extant realities I just described, where things have been dramatically different. All my milling operations that I used to, all the, labor, everything. So that's been dramatically changed. But being able to go in with some time-bound, goals with something so vastly complex is not a good combo. I know people are into what I call goal porn or goal setting and planning porn or whatever. That's all great. When you're dealing with something super complex, it's another, ball of wax, especially something that's been getting developed in real time. I'm happy to report that I believe I've got the model that is going to get repeated. Now, I'm simply just running the paces every week, every day, every month, and finding out what that data really is. How long does it really take me to build one of these things? I've narrowed it down to the one model. So, and we're gonna have an electric variant down the road. That's another conversation. However, so I'm still gathering the data. So when I get when am I getting my instrument question, please understand my hesitation, just because the last few years have been something else. And just so many surprises and unknowns have come right out of the clouds that had nothing to do with the engineering of this thing, although it coincided and made it that much more dramatically crazy. So on one hand, the heat's turned up and I'm building probably the best things I've ever built. On the other hand, I'm having to deal with, yes, all of you waiting on the instruments. And I'm trying to phase that out to the best that I can. And that's gonna mean that, well, things have to be strategically shuffled to make the dots all connect. Again, we're dealing with a different set of logistics. We're dealing with a different set of, well, cash velocity and higher expenses, and so I'm pushing as hard as I can. I'm on the project. I appreciate your patience. It's just, in general, it takes longer than I estimate. Now, even in the best of times, that even was wonky. I had to explain to people, please don't plan your productions, please don't plan all this kind of stuff around you're getting my instrument on a certain day, because it's too complex on this end. It's not like the whole list of people that I'm going through are 95% film and TV composers who are anxious to have it. It's a professional thing. They would like to have an XYZ movie or project. What an honor. That's extremely great. It's just that I'm having to deal with equivalent other colleagues, so who do I piss off, right? I tried doing an expediting program. That didn't pan out really well, so I stopped that about 10 years ago. But anyway, I am having to go to a mixture of non-commissioned builds, or ones that are on spec, ones that go to the rack, and ones that are burning through the queue. It's not ideal in the sense of expediting it, but today's economy has a lot more to say about it, and it's something I've had no control over. The only way that I can keep my doors open is to move the pieces around strategically. And that's just, it doesn't sit well with me. I don't like it. You probably don't like it, but that's just the reality. Anyway, I appreciate your support. I look forward to the big day that you're getting one of these to you. And things are getting better, at least in the physical production part of it. Hopefully we can navigate these times and get through all this garbage that's going on in this world gone mad at the moment. Anyway, have an exceedingly awesome day, stay inspired, and we'll be in touch. And by the way, I would like for you to also consider following my Substack, Jonathan Eric Wilson on Substack. That's sort of where my newsletters migrated to. It's where I want to keep in touch with all of you. It's overwhelming to have to answer so many emails and then blow a good chunk a day getting sucked into that riptide. And I want to be able to give you thoughtful answers, you know, and sometimes if it takes me a minute or a couple days to circle back, generally it's because I have to process that inquiry a little bit, and amongst other tons of plates I'm spinning. So anyway, have an exceedingly awesome day. Stay inspired, stay in touch, and check out the Substack, Jonathan Eric Wilson. See you there.